Hey, I just brought together a bunch of Canada's top 1% real estate investors at our golf tournament, and I interviewed them so that you don't have to, and we really wanted to give you what their biggest lessons were when they're getting into real estate investing. I wish I had this video when I was getting started, and there's gonna be a bunch of lessons in here for you, so please go check them all out. There's about a dozen of them or so. Let's jump right in. Everybody, we have Rob Vettesse. So Rob, what was your first income property, and what was the biggest lesson that you learned from it that you want other people to know about?
So the first income property I bought was 10 Manley Crescent in Thorold. It's a single family home. The biggest lesson I learned was that I should have converted it into a duplex instead of leaving it as a single family home and spending money to upgrade it and make it the perfect single family home instead of using those funds to convert it into a duplex.
That's right. You got to renovate to rent, and you got to always be looking to intensify those properties, right? Hey everybody, this is Cory Froc, one of our coaches in our program. Cory, you got close to 40 doors right now. What was your first income property you ever bought, and what was the biggest lesson that you learned from it?
Yeah, so I actually bought a little duplex in London, Ontario back in 2005, so quite a few years ago. It actually was a really nice property. The mistake I made wasn't doing enough research on the area. So the numbers worked really great because it was in a really bad area, and it was really tough to get good tenants on a long term. So that was probably the biggest lesson I learned.
Let me guess, you were EOA in London.
I was EOA in London, yeah. It was a rough neighborhood. Unless you wanted to buy crack, you could get it right down the street, but it's a pretty ugly neighborhood.
Area is so important when it comes to real estate investing. You cannot pick up the house and bring it to a different area, guys. Just saying. Everybody, question of the day. We got Sandy Mackay. So Sandy, what was your first income property? Because you've done really well with real estate. And what was the biggest lesson that you ever learned from it?
Thanks, Cory. First one was in Oshawa, Ontario, $267,000 duplex. And it takes a lot to take that step in the first acquisition. So in order to do that, you really got to rely on your team of professionals that you built up around you, and go for those referral networks that you can build up, and really trust those people to take that first step, and then you'll learn more along the way and be ready to take bigger steps afterwards.
Was that first one scary? Did you hesitate a little bit?
Very scary, very scary. First house ever purchasing for us, so very scary. 5% down. Numbers were nice still, thankfully back then. But yeah, very scary. Glad we took action though, because it really helped us push forward and build from there.
It's all about taking action, gang. Here's a series of what was your first income property and what was your biggest lesson. So today we have Ali Nazarian. So Ali, what was your first income property and what was the biggest lesson that you want to share in the world right now?
Yeah, my first property was a condo in Richmond Hill, and to help with the cash flow, and ended up doing basically furnished rentals to actually, a lot of them people transitioning between houses or new immigrants landing, need a place to live.
I love it.
And did good cash flow, but this was back in 2016, right? So things were a little easier. Biggest lesson learned is you can almost make anything work. If you put some creativity to it, if the right people around you, bought that property with 5% down, not even living in Toronto at the time. So yeah, having the right people around you and putting some strategy and some grit to it, you can make it work.
Well, there's lots of tips there, okay? 5% down, have a great team around you, and make sure that you're willing to pivot right away if it's not working out, exactly. All right, today we're talking with real estate investors about what their first property was and what their biggest lesson was from buying it. So Manny, tell us the story.
So back in 2016, I was a police officer. I was on my way back from Ontario Police College with some colleagues, and they're all talking about real estate investing. So I go back home, talk to my beautiful wife, and I'm saying, hey, these guys are talking about real estate investing, and I'm kind of curious. And then my wife says to me, and I quote, "Oh, I've always wanted to invest in real estate." And then I look at her and I say, I've been sleeping beside you for 14 years, and we're having this conversation now. So the lesson learned is, communicate with your partner. Communicate with your partner.
Way sooner.
Get in the game way sooner. So within 2 months, we grabbed our first property and we would never look back.
Love it. Lessons from the trenches here. We got Zach Cahill here. And Zach, what was your first income property and what was the biggest lesson that you learned from it?
Thanks, Cory. First income property was back in 2017. I bought a 6-unit apartment in Sudbury. That was a burr. Converted actually to 7 units. Biggest lesson is having the right people, Cory. At the time, I used a contractor who may or may not have been doing the right renovations. And even though I got all my money back doing the burr, a few years later, the city came knocking at the door and shut down my 7th unit.
Oh, so it wasn't a 6-plex, you turned it into a 7-plex.
Yeah, illegally. Illegally, yeah.
Today we have Alvin Wong. So Alvin, tell us about your first income property that you ever bought and what was the biggest lesson that you want to get out in the world today about buying income properties?
Yeah, Cory. My very first income property is in Windsor, Ontario. It's a duplex. My biggest takeaway lesson is really know your market, I invested in an F+ neighborhood.
I thought neighborhood stopped at D, but this was an F?
Oh, this is worse, worse than D. You will never find anything worse than D. This is a bad neighborhood. So always make sure that you always find a good neighborhood. You'll find great tenants. You'll find a lot of good neighbors as well too. So that's a lesson I learned.
So if it was an F-grade neighborhood, I don't even want to know what kind of tenants you got in there. F-grade tenants?
F+ everything. Neighborhood, people just walking by my property, and also tenants. You know, you get what you pay for, right?
Everybody, welcome back to the series. What was your first property and what was your biggest lesson that you learned from it? We have Mark Loeffler here. So Mark, what was your first property that you ever bought and what was your biggest lesson that you learned?
I bought a duplex in Newmarket, Ontario, and my biggest lesson learned was I didn't know what the hell I was doing and it didn't matter. Just kept making mistakes all along the way and I made a lot of money from it. So
there you go. And you should have bought how many more?
Should have bought all of them.
Everybody, we have Michael Succurro here and we're going to be asking him what was his first investment property and what was the biggest lesson that he learned. So Michael, what was your first property that you ever bought and what was the biggest lessons there?
Yeah, so the first property I ever bought, it was a detached bungalow, beautiful lot, 55 by 170. And property was still a great deal. I got it for $1,050,000, but they wanted a quick close, 15 days. This was during COVID time, so everybody was rushing to close you. And the biggest lesson I learned there is never let anybody rush you, especially on a big investment like that, because we skipped out on the inspection. And they cost me a little bit once we closed that property. So definitely take your time, don't let anybody rush you, and always go through the inspection.
Yeah, you're saying even the range hood wasn't even cut out or vented?
Yeah, there's a beautiful range hood there, but wasn't even cut out, wasn't even plugged in, wasn't even vented. So again, don't jump too quick into any investment.
Yes, your return on investment on a home inspection is massive, gang. Everybody, tip of the day. What was your first property, Michael Wach, and what was your biggest lesson by buying that income property?
First one was a single family home in Hamilton, and biggest lesson is do not accept a tenant from Winnipeg that you've never met or seen before telling you that they have no big dogs.
I guess there's a big dog in the property, guys. So people always over-exaggerate the size of the dog. It's a small dog. No, it's 50 pounds. That's not a small dog. Everybody here, I'm with Jake Novus. And Jake, what was your first income property and what's your biggest lesson that you want to share in the world right now?
Hey, Cory. First income property was a 6-unit in Hamilton. It was in a rough area. I think my lesson was some areas don't gentrify as quick as you think, so just plan accordingly.
It's important, gang. Gentrification, you can't bank on it. You got to make sure you're catching that wave as it's going. We have Nate Atkin here and we have lessons in real estate. So Nate, tell us about your first income property you ever bought and what's the craziest story that happened there?
Oh, the first income property was actually a condominium. I used to work for my father's property management company and it was in condos. So we learned all about condominiums. So I ended up buying a condominium for my first income property. You want to hear about the craziest thing that happened?
Yes.
You sure? Okay, I don't know if you're ready for this one, but we actually owned the property. There was a stripper that lived in the unit above, and she used to have a wild party. She had dogs in there, and she let her dogs just go to the washroom anywhere they wanted to. They used to poop all in the bathtub, and it actually corroded the drain below. So what happened was the dog crap and pee and everything actually came through the drain and damaged the ceiling above and collapsed into my unit's bathroom. So there's dog and poop and pee everywhere all over the place into our bathroom for our unit.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my first property I ever owned, first experience.
Did you make money on that one at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, I did, but if I had held on to it longer, I would have made more money. But I'll tell you, that was it. After that great experience, I was hooked, and that was it. I was buying investment properties after that forever.
Love it. Everybody, we'd love to do these collaborations to get you your tip of the day. So Jacob Perez here, what was one of your first investment properties and what are a couple big takeaways that people need to know when they're getting started in real estate?
Well, my first investment property was pretty simple. I wanted something that cash flowed. I wanted a multi-unit property, and I went looking at a bunch of properties, and what I discovered was I was really afraid of the tenant profile when I was looking at some of these multi-units in the inner city. So I ended up actually buying a nice shiny condo, something that looked really attractive. And one of the biggest mistakes I made was I listened to the listing agent about what it would rent for. I didn't do my own market research. And when I actually closed on the property, it turned out the rent I could actually get was a lot lower than they were projecting on it. So I ended up in a negative cash flow position for about a year or two. So I think doing your own independent research on some of the key metrics, especially the rent you're expecting to get, would be something very important.